You have to just constantly be bringing it out into the light and reminding yourself, like, this is a part of me that exists and I haven't seen it in a while and it's really scary, but I need to share. How you feeling?
I'm I'm alive. Um, we were just laughing about how I can't fucking smell anything.
Yeah, Emily has
And
COVID or had COVID, is recovering from it.
yeah, and I had all the whole rigmarole, all the symptoms.
What a
I feel
word,
like
rigmarole.
rigmarole.
What are you, an old man?
I'm totally an old man. Feel like an old man. I sound like an old man. I kind of feel like I look like an old man
You
at
got
this
it.
point,
You got
honest to goodness.
it. Yeah. Rigmarole. Okay,
Like,
sorry.
listen. The I had no idea. I've never lost my sense of smell before, first of all, so this is new for me. And I just, until, like they say, you don't know what you had until it's gone. And I was just like realizing how much fucking information you are getting constantly from your sense of
Yeah.
smell, especially
Uh-huh.
around food. But even like I could have like horrible BO right now and I would just never know. Like I'm like doing all the things. I'm making sure I'm like doing my normal stuff, but it's just like, you're sitting around and you're like, "Ooh, I don't smell very fresh. I need to go like freshen up a little bit." That's like
Yeah.
information I do not have anymore. It is
Yeah.
gone.
I was gonna say I have a friend and from college, and he actually was like walking down the street and got hit by a car.
Oh shit.
He was like crossing, and it wasn't like, I mean, it was hard enough to put him in the hospital, I guess. But I don't think I can't remember. It was so long ago. I don't think he like broke anything, but he had like a massive concussion and he lost his sense of smell.
Like forever.
And yeah, and he always smelled so bad. And we would always be like, bro, take a shower. He was like, I
You just have to
am.
like put it in the calendar.
Yeah. No, but he would be like, I am. And we were like, well, it's like not working. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You have to still do the thing even though you can't smell yourself. Like,
Yeah.
put some deodorant on. He was like, I don't know, it feels like weird. And so I don't know, it was just like such a funny, like ongoing joke with this guy where
This
people were
poor
like,
dude just
bro, your car smells so bad. Like, cause he was like whitewater kayaker. And so his car would always be filled with like wet neoprene, which is like
yeah.
such a distinct and rancid smell.
Okay.
And I remember getting in his like truck and being like, no,
Oh
bud,
no.
it's so foul.
Like,
Anyway.
yeah,
So yeah,
like,
you
and all of
probably
that.
stink.
I probably smell really bad right now, and I feel I like haven't been out in public yet, and I'm gonna have to have like some preparation before I go out in public.
I
Like
feel
I
like your
seriously
hair
think
looks real cute.
oh, thanks. I appreciate you saying that. It's just been, yeah, it's been really bizarre. And like food doesn't taste like I have an essence. Like I can tell something's like salty. I can tell something's kind of sweet, but like
Yes, that's
it's
what he
taken
used to
all the
say.
it's taken all the joy out of eating. Like
hmm
I just
I actually lost my sense of taste and smell when I was severely depressed. I had like a
oh
period of
fuck.
time. Yeah, it really freaked
Really?
me out. I remember because it's like just like dark humor sometimes like hits you in just the right way. And I was
Yeah.
so fucking depressed that I called my mom and I was like, you have to know this is like a good story.
Uh
I called her and I was like, I can't smell or taste anything. I'm so sad. And she was like, have you tried using your tears to salt your food or something like that? And I just like
oh my
fucking lost it. Like, you know, when it's like you're in such a dark place and someone finally like cracks through
yeah,
like
the
to get
only
to you
way
and you
place to
have
go. Yeah.
the most like cathartic like release of laughter. Like
Uh-huh.
I just was like, that was fucking hilarious. She was like, have you
That's
tried using
amazing.
your tears as salt?
To salt your food.
Fuck
Oh
mom,
my
it's so
god.
dark and so funny.
Yeah. Ugh, it's
It's like
so like
forever one of my favorite things she's ever said to me because it just
yeah.
like made me laugh for weeks, years really. I'm still laughing about
Still.
it. It's still makes me like makes me laugh so hard.
It's so true. There is, and actually, this kind of segues nicely because there, I was thinking a little bit just now about the role that humor plays
In
in
healing.
healing from like really fucked up shit, like, and just like
Mhm.
surviving and making sense of the fucked up shit. And
Mhm.
like in the last episode we recorded, you referred to that a bunch, and you referred to
Mm.
like the level of healing that you identify with other friends or people that have experienced addiction, and that there's this like level of understanding that you guys can connect on, and probably like a level of humor that you can connect on. And I identify, I mean, I identify with like the dark humor in my own painful stuff, how it's really important to fucking like be able to laugh about it.
Laugh
I
about
think
it.
because you take your power back. You take something that like
Mhm.
almost killed you, that was the most painful thing you ever experienced, and you take your power back by being able to laugh at it. And I don't know, I would love to hear you talk about the role humor has played in your
Dude,
recovery from addiction and all of that.
humor is the best when you can get there. There's definitely a phase where like it's not funny.
Yeah.
But when you get to a place where like you can find humor in it, I don't know, it just like it makes you feel not alone. Because
Mm,
usually we are laughing with someone, right? And it's like a knowing laugh. So it's like a way of connecting and
yes.
also reflecting on kind of the absurdity of it all.
Mm,
Um and I don't know, that's like the best AA meetings are the ones that are just like or well, I mean, actually, that's not like true. It's not the best, but some of my favorites are when people are just like when you're literally like all crying, laughing, because it comes from a place of like deep knowing, and like we've
yes.
all been there and we are all like overcoming. And so I don't know, I think that's why humor is healing, because it's a sign of not, and obviously there are exceptions, right? But oftentimes it's a sign that you have kind of come out the other side because you can laugh at
I
it,
love that.
you
Yes,
know.
yes. I love that
And
way of
also,
looking
there's a
at it.
lot to
Yeah.
laugh about in addiction. I
Yeah.
think
I
there's
think like the
so much to
grasping
laugh
on,
about.
like you were saying, the absurdity of things and how like just
Hmm.
bananas and how it doesn't make sense, and when that can be the big cosmic joke, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And there's so much with that with addiction, because there's so many like contradictions and mental gymnastics, and to just like look at your past self and like laugh at how hard you like
Like,
had to work
wow.
to try and be
Yeah.
like, nah, I think I'm good. I definitely don't have a problem. I'm definitely gonna still keep drinking. Like as like I don't know,
Yeah.
your like literal like arm could be cut off, and like an addict would be like, nah, nah, I'm good. I'm good. Let's keep going. Let's keep drinking. Like
Right.
it's like what's wrong with
So
you?
like the massive, like that's another thought I had in reflection from the conversation we just had for the last episode, was just how fucking brilliant like your mind is. Like honestly, like for somebody to create such, like you're saying, like mental gymnastics and such like a structure to like participate in denial, like it takes like a
Hmm.
level of brilliance, I think, to like, and that's not saying like,
Listen.
but yeah, it takes like a level of like working a like work about and like making things make sense and tricking yourself, that is
Hmm.
like impressive, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
No, there's actually a lot of things that addicts do that I find ultimately like very impressive. And I think that's why I have such a special place in my heart for like wanting to help them. And I think that I've said this before, but I feel like I know in my bones that I have another business in me, and I'm pretty
Mm.
confident it has something to do with like bringing entrepreneurship to addicts. Um
Mm.
so something like I just feel like it's forming, it's growing, it's happening, and it's out there, and it's coming closer and closer to me. Is kind of how it feels.
Yes.
But
Yes.
in part because I feel like addicts are, I mean, they're some of the smartest people I've ever met, honestly.
Mm.
Like, they're so like some of the things that they do are like like they're just like like so genius, and so and what are the words I'm like looking for here, it's like they're clever, like they're some of the
Yeah.
most clever resourceful, like not always like resourceful in like a healthy way or resourceful in
Sure.
like a productive way. Oftentimes it causes a lot of pain for themselves. But like they can be super resourceful. They're usually almost always so profoundly empathetic, which I actually think often contributes to the addiction because they're
And the
so
pain.
empathetic that
Yeah.
the
Wow.
world is overwhelming. And they don't, and so
Mm,
they need like, I mean, a big part of recovery is like learning how to like deal with your emotions and like in a healthy way. And most of
right.
us didn't grow up with tools of how to navigate our emotions in like a healthy way. And so I think that's a big part of it too. So they're like deeply empathetic, very resourceful, super clever. And they've just kind of been channeling all that energy into getting fucked up and trying to like escape the world. And when you can like repair the parts of them that cause them to want to
Right.
do that or bring peace to those areas, uh, and then take all that same like cleverness and like
Yeah.
channel it
Apply
into
it.
something
Yeah.
productive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have like I think they're kind of awesome. I think addicts are
Yeah.
amazing.
Like I've been thinking a lot about this idea that I've heard various people talking about. It's this idea that your greatest strengths and your
Mm-hmm.
shadow are actually
Mm-hmm.
two sides of the same coin. That they have like
100%.
that it has a negative expression, like this shadowy expression, or the parts that you're limiting and repressing, or whatever. And then there's this really beautiful, like positive expression of these strengths, and it applies, I think, so well here in this conversation. And I don't know, I guess I'm curious, would if you have any reflections on like you personally, like your like personally where you've seen that transition, like where your cleverness, your resourcefulness was being channeled, and then like how it shows up today, in like a
100%.
positive
So
light.
many. And again, I always love to touch on, I feel like I've said it a few times now, where like, I think that's one of the like limitations of the 12 steps is just in the fact that they call it like these character defects. And I think that like the whole concept of thinking in yourself as parts and also remembering that oftentimes like things that you don't like aren't your favorite things about yourself are often the other side of a coin of like parts of yourself that you actually do like. I mean, for
Mm,
me, it's I always am reminding myself that with my relationship with Ben, where I'm like this part of him that gets like super nervous to go on trips or whatever it is, like slightly neurotic, is like also this side of him that I like fucking adore, where
mm,
he's like meticulous and like gets things done and takes care of the house and us and like does everything 110%. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
yes,
so
yes.
I think that's actually like kind of the main thing I think that's missing, but I think it's very important from that conversation. And so yeah, it's funny. I've remember I've tried to explain this to you before because I actually don't feel like there's a word for it, at least that I know of. But I think that
Mm,
I have a character trait that I think the closest word to it is clever. And
mm,
oftentimes people mistake it or think that it's like a form of like, I've been told that I'm smart, and I think that I am to some extent, but I actually think that it's mistake like my intelligence or whatever it is to whatever capacity it's perceived by others is actually closer to a cleverness, which comes
mm,
from like a sense of um awareness and also from being pretty empathetic. Like I think I'm pretty
mm,
tapped into other people's emotions, and actually I think that's part of what caused me to drink is that I didn't know how to set up personal boundaries, and so other people's pain became my own
mm.
pretty quickly. And so I
Wow.
literally felt like I had like the weight of the world on me. Like the news, I had to stop watching the news while I was getting sober because it was like it it was all consuming. Like it was just like it was so painful because I like literally
Right.
took it on as my own. um and learning how to separate myself in a healthy way from other people's
Mm-hmm.
like pain and suffering, not to not care. That was like an important distinction that I had to go through, like to realize it doesn't mean I don't care, and it just means that I'm like can be healthier myself so I can help people from a better
Yes.
place. Because like I will
Yeah.
tell you one thing is for damn sure, I could not help fucking anyone from a place of like taking on everyone else's pain to the point where I'm like
Right.
literally in the fetal position on the floor. Like,
Right.
like you just there's a big difference between, I don't know, I see that so much in the conversation, like when big things happen in the world, and there are the people who say things like, how dare you be like happy in a time like this, or how dare you
Mm.
like create art in a time like this, and I'm just like, what the actual fuck? That is like the time in which we need those things. And
Yes.
not everyone has to like crawl into a fetal position on the floor,
Right.
um because of things going on outside of themselves. Like, it's just not it's not helpful, it's not like healing, it's not productive, it's not based in growth. It's like, it's kind of like weird and dysfunctional, and it's definitely like something I see a lot in the conversation today, where I'm like, I don't agree with that. So yeah, I don't know, there's a lot of different shadowy bits of me, I think, that are actually, I don't know, like my cleverness, which is like what led a lot of people to being kind of surprised when I went to rehab, in my life at that point, where we kind of knew each other, is like what
Mm-hmm.
kept my like drinking kind of like a secret from a lot of people.
Mm.
But yeah, it's being channeled into like the work that I do, my
Right.
relationship, and that feels really good.
This has been such a big part of our languaging and how we speak about ourselves in parts, right? As opposed to the whole.
Mhm.
And I do know that like a big part of the whole AA thing is about identifying the whole I am an addict. And I guess I would
Mhm.
love your thoughts about that, because it seems like you have a different take on it, as you're like looking at yourself in parts and looking, and I don't know, what does that look like for you?
Um, so actually in the 12 steps, like the first step is, I actually just pulled it up so I said it exactly as it is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. So I don't know actually necessarily, and I really can't speak about AA like with total authority on it, right? I can only speak from
Sure.
my experience with it.
Right.
Um but for some people, it's important to say, I am an addict, I am an
Mm.
alcoholic, because it
Mm-hmm.
becomes something that they fully admit to themselves. And I actually
Right.
still don't know where I fall in this, because I see both. I really do. I see some people saying, like, I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, owning that and feeling empowered by it, or at least feeling like they're keeping themselves in check by it, knowing that it is like really dangerous for them, because for some people it's dangerous to say like experience addiction, you know what I mean?
Right.
um
To like potentially fall back into that like denial space
yeah, because then you can very quickly slip into a place of like, oh, I only experience it, and I only experienced it at that point in time because it was,
in that place
um
because of this.
yeah,
Yeah,
because life was
interesting. Yeah.
going on and it was hard, and like that kind of thinking is like
Right.
very much like addiction thinking that has people like continuing to use. It's like
Right.
really a slippery slope. But I do think that there's a little bit more room for the variety of human experience. You know what I mean? Like, and
Mm.
the different spectrums we fall on. Because again, I think so often we take our own personal experience, right? And we have such a habit of being like, this is everyone's experience with addiction. And I've
Mm.
just,
Sure.
in talking with people, like it is very different, but that inherently is dangerous for an addict, because addicts are so quick to look at someone's story, and that's something that has concerned me about sharing my story, and say,
Uh-huh.
oh well, she doesn't like go to AA meetings every single day, I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to. And then that turns into, I don't actually need AA. I don't need to call my sponsor. I don't need to like check in. I don't really need to do this. I don't need to do that. And then like they're drinking
Right.
again. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, it's kind of fucked up. And one of my
Yeah.
favorite actually images, I forget this woman's name. I'm sure I could like Google it and figure it out. But she had this little podcast called like 1 Minute Thoughts or something, that I used to listen to when I was first like getting sober for like me. I feel like I break
Mm.
it into my mind as like getting sober for my family and then getting sober for me.
Yeah.
Um, because it was like two very distinct feelings, right? Like the energy behind both of those were, one was like filled with anger and resentment, and one
Mm.
was filled with like desperation and like hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, desperation, a little bit of hope, and also just kind of being sick of myself. Like that's a big
Yeah.
feeling. Like I was like,
Fed
I'm
up.
so, like I just was like, I'm just like, I wish I could like get a break from myself. Like I just like
Mm.
don't want to be around me. Like how do I do
Mhm.
that? uh
Right.
and so anyway, this woman, I really liked it, and now I see that it's kind of almost the same, a similar concept to thinking of ourselves in parts. But she used to refer to the voice in our minds that is addiction or comes from the place of addiction as separate from who we are, and
Mm,
actually
okay.
a voice that's important to distinguish between, like which voice is me and which voice is the addiction trying to like bring me down, trying to get me to make a series of
Mm.
bad decisions where I end up in a place where I'm drinking again. And she actually called that voice Wolfie, like the wolf that lives
Okay.
inside of every, and I just like loved that image, was like so helpful for me, to think of it as one, not me, you know what I mean, to be like,
Uh-huh.
this isn't like all of who I am. And this is actually,
Right.
I came across this like stuff before I met you. So it was not, I didn't have the like languaging of like thinking of myself in parts and things like that. But it's, so it's like kind of a version of that though, where it's like to think of this voice that goes on in your head that's really harmful as something that isn't like all of who you are, and it's like a part of you. It's actually really helpful in my opinion, because it, one,
Mm.
it reduces the amount of where you think that you're a horrible person. It
Right.
reduces like the thoughts around like, this is all that I am, and so I'm like inherently less valuable as a human on this earth.
Right.
um and I don't know, it's also a nice like image to be like, okay, that's a wolfy thought that's leading me to a place that's actually very harmful for me.
It seems to me that like that understanding or belief that you know our ground is rooted in, how do you like rebuild trust with yourself, when there's like this like part of your brain that's like really trying to get you to do super harmful things, and
That's like the key.
yeah.
That's, I mean, that's like a huge part of it, is rebuilding trust within yourself.
Right.
And the way that I know how to do it best is like actually similar to how we've talked about building self-trust, like like in any other episode or in any other area of our
Mm,
life. And it's just like making small promises to yourself and like keeping them.
yes.
um so and it's slow and it's gradual. And for me also, it's a big part of it, I think, at least initially, a big part of it for me, I had to actually like protect myself from certain people, certain like ideas, especially like when you're like newly sober. I honestly like had to not be around certain people. Like I had a friend who was definitely like an active like alcoholic. Again, on this more on the spectrum of, obviously she can continue drinking because it's not, she's not like constantly getting DUIs or anything like that, but like when she
Sure.
drinks, the version of herself that like comes out, I was like, oh man. And I like had to stop being friends with her because like being around an active alcoholic, and that is part of the AA like process, is you like help those people, and it's like a good reminder of like what it's like to be there. But when I was like newly sober, I like could not be around people like that because it just
Yeah.
like, it kind of normalized it, made it feel like it was
Oh,
okay. I don't know
okay.
how to explain it. It's like actually a really odd feeling. It's weird because you wouldn't think that being around that would make you want to drink, but in some weird way, it kind of does, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
It's like,
Like, yeah, like what do you feel like your brain was just like working really hard to be like, look, she's fine, she's fucking fine, like it's
no,
okay, like that? No.
not even that. It's more like, okay, for example, when I watched The Queen's Gambit, have you seen that movie?
Yeah. Yes.
And she has periods of time where she does like, she has serious binge drinking episodes.
Mm.
which is actually like how I used to do it, which is part of how I was like a functional alcoholic, because I would like have a week where I maybe had a glass of wine with dinner, is fine. Something in life would happen, I would like hole up for a Saturday and just like be hammered. Or like start out and about, and then it would like continue on into the night and into the next morning or something like that. And watching that, obviously I don't want to go back to that, but there was something about it, was like very triggering, I guess is what it is, where it's like it's almost like it brings you back to all the thought processes and feelings and emotions of when you're like actively drinking, that it just makes it feel like that much closer, actually, where
Sure.
you like, I almost feel like it conjured up for me the state of like being drunk watching those
Right.
scenes,
Okay.
where I was
Wow.
just like, oh, I'm like there. And so it feels, it's not so much like, oh, she's fine. No, she's not fine. That seems awful. But it feels like closer, like it feels within
Mm,
reach. Whereas like I try to keep it very much like far away. Like,
right.
if that makes any sense. It's kind of hard to
Yeah, no,
explain.
yeah, I feel like you're doing a good job. Do you feel like that's correlated to the empathy bit of like being somebody that
Maybe.
can so like embody other people's pain and other people's experiences, that being around that gets on you so much?
Maybe. Yeah. And I don't know that it's true for everyone else. I've actually never
Sure.
explained that feeling to someone except for Ben. Cuz like when we watched The Queen's Gambit, I was like, this is really hard for me. Like
Yeah.
I uh like just watching somebody in like deep active addiction is like so painful.
Mm,
And feels dangerous. Like I don't know how else to explain it. Like I'm just like that,
yeah.
this feels like too close for comfort, like
Sure. Yeah,
that.
I mean, I feel like that makes a ton of sense, like that closeness. And so you had to learn to create boundaries then, right? Like
Mhm.
boundaries with people in your life that were not good for you, to keep yourself safe in that like really vulnerable uh I
Yeah.
mean, it's probably actually an act. I'm sure it's an active, like an active. Actually, that's what I would love to hear you speak about, is like how sobriety is like an ongoing, active thing. It's
Oh,
not,
100%.
right, something that you just achieve. Like, and like, I guess
Mhm.
I'm curious, like what that is like, and how boundaries are a part of that.
That's
And
yeah.
yeah.
That's a huge part of it. One, I think, cuz like, in recovery they talk a lot about radical honesty. That
Mm,
is essential to staying sober. Essential. One of the biggest things for me for drinking would be when I had something big and painful that I like needed to come out, and I like didn't know, I just couldn't let it out in a healthy way.
mm,
Like childhood trauma, things like that. But also like being in relationship, like going through the divorce, like wanting to ask for a divorce, wanting, being so miserable and not knowing what to do or how to escape and feeling trapped, like that perfect like catalyst for just wanting to be like hammered all the time.
yeah.
And so it's 100% an active thing. I think though that it gets easier the longer you've been doing it. Obviously, the place where it gets scary is when like big life events happen. That's like common.
Mm,
People want to like dip back into it. Like, I don't know, a death in the family,
right.
something like that, a diagnosis of some kind. Um, but yeah, it is an ongoing thing. And I think that one, raising your baselines is essential. And knowing like if you start to dip below like a certain area in your relationships with other people, um and I mean in so many ways, in the way you take care of yourself. Working out for me is 100% so much more about my mental health than anything else. Like, if I didn't work out last week because I really hurt my back, and all last weekend I was so obnoxious. Like I was just like nagging the hell out of Ben, and just like, and he would just look at me and be like, what, like what's happening? And I was like, I don't know, I'm sorry. And then I worked out and like endorphins like flooded me, and I was like, oh,
Wow.
it's because I haven't been working out for a week, I'm so sorry. And he was like, it's
Mm.
okay, that was grumpers is what he calls me when I'm like that.
Mm,
We call each other that. It's like to stay sober, you like have to take care of yourself. It's kind of a non-negotiable.
mm,
But for me, that's ultimately been like such a gift. And a big part of why I like work for myself, quite frankly, because I could take care of
mm,
myself better than if I were to work at like a company that, like, I don't know, you just have to show up regardless of how you're feeling, not work 9 to 5. Giving back is a big part of, I think, recovery. It's like definitely part of the 12 steps, oftentimes helping other addicts, but I actually think that just like making sure you're giving back in general is just really healing, really good for the empathetic part of you. Feels really good, brings meaning to your life, makes it easier to get out of bed in the morning when you're like not just living for yourself. That's a big part of staying sober. And then, oh, going back to the radical honesty, being really fucking honest when you have like twinges. Like a few months ago, I told Ben, I was like, I don't know exactly what's going on, but I like really wanted to like drink. Actually, remember when I got into a big fight with someone in my family and they were really angry at me. Um,
mm.
and I shared with you and with Ben because I knew it was important to my sobriety.
Yes.
I
Hmm.
said, I haven't had this feeling in a while, but I have to admit out loud to like safe people in my life that there is a big part of me that's like being kicked up right now who is like, I know what you should do. You should go get wasted.
Yeah.
Like, and I was
Yeah.
like, I haven't had like a craving to like drink in honestly years until that, and it was like, okay, and I had to just be kind to myself and share with the you and Ben like this is happening, and then you were
Mm.
very much like that makes sense, and just sharing it out loud is huge because that's also where people like slip up, is when they stop sharing
Keep it
things like that
hidden.
with
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. It's like
Mm,
it's how it festers, and you have to just
mm.
constantly be bringing it out into the light and reminding yourself like this is a part of me that exists and I haven't seen it in a while, and it's really scary, but I need to share. And it helps too that Ben doesn't drink, so I don't know, there's no judgments there from him. I think it would be really
Right.
hard if you it's really hard when you have like a partner, for example, who doesn't get it quite like entirely, and you
Hmm.
share usually you don't share it like you want to share it with somebody who usually like gets it and also isn't like scared of
Yeah.
you in
Who's
that
like
place,
safe?
because
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
because if you had a partner who doesn't get it, who's a normie, is what we call them, people who don't have struggles with addictions. If you have a partner who's a normie and like experienced a lot of pain from your addiction, it's a complicated scenario because when that feeling comes up, people are so much less likely to share with that person because there is
Right.
pain that because then you share it with them and they're like, oh shit, are you gonna
And
drink
then the
again? Like
fear
they're like,
response. Yeah.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
they have a big fear response, which makes you feel terrible. Um, so it's like it's a process, and also I don't know. I never thought I would end up with somebody who didn't drink, because most people drink. I feel like, but having being in a relationship with somebody who doesn't drink is like honestly the fucking best because it's just like not even
Mm.
a like we go out to dinner. It's like not even like is he gonna have a glass of wine? Um, it's just like not there. Um, and it makes it honestly just like brings a lot of ease for me into my life with not just like eliminating the conversation like altogether.
Yes, like you touched on something so huge there. Like it's almost this catch 22 that probably exists for a lot of people when like what is needed is this radical honesty, but the people in your life may not be able to hold like neutral space for that like Ben and I were
Mm-hmm.
for able to do for you, and because of the
Mm-hmm.
fear response.
That's one of the biggest gifts of AA and sponsors. Those are the people you go to who get it, who aren't scared of you because they've been in the fucking trenches themselves. And so they're not
Yes.
afraid of you. They're like, dude, good on you for sharing with me. That was important. And I know how important it is. And like, let's keep talking about it. Keep telling me. Let's check in more. Okay.
Yes.
Like you're feeling this thing. It's being kicked up. It makes a lot of sense. can you get to a meeting where you can hear other people talk about their stories? Because usually the thing about meetings that they say is you always hear something that you're supposed to hear. And it's true.
Mm,
So you always, if you go in with an open mind and interested in like squeezing as much value out of it as you can, you're always going to hear something that brings
that's
awareness and insight into your own life and what's going on in your
yes.
own life.
I
Um,
love that.
and so, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lot.
I no, this is all so good. Like I I literally like have like a whole like list that I wrote of like more
Of
questions
questions.
that I have for you. I guess like one thing, and it kind of goes along with like just what we were saying, how that there are and always will be triggering experiences that exist
Mm-hmm.
in the world that could potentially activate like this that response that you had, like, oh my god, I need to drink to deal with this. Or
Mm-hmm.
and I guess I'm just like curious, there's this whole idea of like that we talk about of unmet needs, and how when unmet
Mm.
needs exist for a long time, a lot of times we develop whatever coping mechanisms to deal with these unmet needs. And you've touched a bit on like childhood trauma and different things with your family and how you were treated by your family in correlation to your biological father. And I guess I'd like from your point of view, the um the unmet needs that you then coped or numbed or whatever it was with the drinking, and like when you got sober, like it doesn't mean those needs are magically met. Like, you know what I mean? You like made this choice to get
Mm-hmm.
sober, and then I imagine had to face all these unmet needs and all the emotions and all the
Mm-hmm.
relationships. And I guess I would be
Mm-hmm.
really curious to hear you talk about how like that healing process of like acknowledging those unmet needs, acknowledging like what replaced the I want to cope with drinking. You know what I mean? What came into that like space for managing the all of that overwhelming stuff and all the feelings.
Totally. And it's interesting because when I was first getting sober, I still don't think I had this languaging of like unmet needs. And I think that
Mm,
like so much of the languaging we use, like unmet needs, parts of ourselves, kind of like trying to see the benefits and consequences of like all of these different character traits and not necessarily like labeling them as character defects or shortcomings, but also being radically honest and willing
mm,
to like look at them and say like these are less than ideal. I don't really
yeah.
like, I want to work on this, I want to come to a better place with this part of myself and not just like fully necessarily like remove it. I think that's like the nuance of the conversation that I think would be so helpful. But yeah, so one of the things that you do when you're working through the 12 steps is you identify like areas of your life where there was a lot of pain, and then you have to say your part in it. And it's painful because most of the things that, are a lot of the things that there's a lot of pain around, you feel like a victim or you feel like
Yeah.
it was done to you. And
Yeah.
so a big part of this, which again, I think there's like so much languaging that would help people understand that that's actually what's happening in the 12 steps, and
Mm,
it's not necessarily being explained in that way all the time, is the way it's so powerful is like it's super painful, right, to like not be a victim in those situations and to take it's painful at first to take ownership of your part in them because,
mm,
like, let me give you an example of something. It's like if there was a situation in which your part in it was not having realistic expectations of a person because they've shown you time and time and time again that they are a particular way, and you are still hurt that they're not showing up in your life in a way that you want them to. Your part
mm,
in the pain of these situations is having expectations that caused your self harm. And like that's
Mm.
fucking hard to come to terms with
That's a hard pill to
when you're
swallow,
like,
yeah.
it is a hard fucking pill to swallow, especially if it's
Mm.
like with a parent where you're like, I wanted them to like live out this idea of like what a dad or a mom looked like, right? And
Sure,
then
yeah.
and they're not that because they're a human. And they're just like a messy human just like the rest of us, right? Dealing
Mhm.
with their own shit, their own unresolved trauma and pain. But especially as you're like kind of growing up and our parents had that like separation from us to where I feel like a lot of us came to an age in their like 20s where you're like, oh, they are just humans. And we've talked about this before. Like, that's a very like painful experience that I think a lot of us
Mm.
have gone through. I'm very interested in how I can prevent that in happening with my kids, actually, um, so that they just grow up knowing that I'm a fucking hot mess, and they're not surprised. I'm like,
Right.
look, I just like, I probably will like. I hope I don't overcompensate, and I'm just like always telling my
I'm a
children that I'm a
disaster. Just
disaster.
yeah. Definitely.
You're gonna help me with that. You're gonna be like, chill,
Yeah.
bro.
You're
Like,
doing good. You're doing good.
you're not that much of a mess anymore. And I'm like, no, but I was
Right.
really fucked up at one point. Like,
Kids, you
trust me.
gotta know mom's fucked up.
Yeah,
Say
yeah,
it
yeah.
after
I need you
me.
to know. And so that's a really, really important part of the 12 steps, I think. But also what comes about as a result of it. And I think, again, there's like missing language or better language that's just evolved over time that I think that would be really beneficial to incorporate into recovery, is identifying that a lot of that angst and pain in those particular situations come from unmet needs, because you're
Mm.
wanting a need to be met from that partner, but like not only are they maybe incapable of it, but there's a really fucking good chance that you didn't know how to ask for it at that point in time. You didn't know how
Mm.
to look at that person and
Yes.
be like, I just wanted you to like hug me and tell me I'm not a freak. You know what I mean? Rather
Mm.
than criticize me or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I just think that the like conversation around unmet needs, okay, now how you meet that, if that was like more incorporated in recovery. And I think some people are doing it on their own just because this conversation, the way in which we're talking, is kind of like happening everywhere, um
Mm.
and growing, which is beautiful. But yeah, coming to terms with or identifying unmet needs and trying to meet them within myself or with my partner, and also setting some expectations and boundaries in place to kind of protect yourself. But also, I think it's not even just to protect yourself, it's to have like a more accurate and realistic interpretation of like the world around you. Because when you
Okay.
filter your pain through expectations that aren't maybe appropriate, I don't feel like appropriate's quite the right word. You create a lot of pain for yourself.
Right.
Um and it's a process to, one, become aware of that, and two, to then know what the fuck to do with it.
There's so many layers of like addressing denial. Like, it's just like it's like an onion. Like there's just like layers and layers of it. And it makes sense that denial is so present because it is like the ultimate protective mechanism of just like pretending it's not real, right? Like
Yeah,
uh,
it's like
like we're just
it's the
gonna
protector that allows it to go on for so long, like
yes.
one of the
Yes.
primary protectors that allows addiction to go unchecked is
Right.
denial. And so
Right.
when you've been living in that place for so long, I mean, that's literally like what the 12 steps are. It's like radical honesty, looking at your
Yeah.
life, um and also like removing victimhood from
Mm.
how you perceive literally everything, like even, yeah, literally everything in your life.
And
And
that is
also
such
really handling resentment is like
mm,
the main one of the main things you're like tackling, is kind of like removing resentment from your life because it just festers and eats you alive.
right. And resentment, it's like resentment and victimhood probably have like a lot of they correlate a
Mm-hmm.
lot and they support each other, right?
Uh-huh.
Because
They're
if
buds.
you're Yeah, if you're operating in a victim mentality, your resentment of what happened will keep you in that victim mentality because it was done
Mm-hmm.
to you, right? And
Yeah.
I love the like this whole idea, as hard of a concept as it is to wrap your head around sometimes, this idea of like owning your part, which is distinct from victim blaming. Like you're not
Mm-hmm.
taking on responsibility and you're not owning things that aren't yours to own, but what you're doing
Yes.
is you're
Yes.
right, because it can go, you can go way far on the other side, and
Mm-hmm.
pendulate over there. But like is it's about just what you were saying, the radical honesty of owning, even if it's a little part of like, I had weird
Even
expectations of this person. Yeah.
and it can be
um
hard because you're like, of course I had those expectations. I was a child, like,
they're supposed to be my fucking
and you,
parent. Yes,
yeah, and
yes,
you rebel against that, and then but like the AA and the 12 steps is like, no, like eliminate that, not eliminate it, but like that's hurting you by just saying
right,
over and over again, like I didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. It's like, okay, you didn't know any better, but it still was your part, you know? And it's just like
yes.
it's hard work because you're just like, no, the
Everything
whole
in
way
you,
through.
because right, because everything in you has been like crafted around like
Mhm.
denying fact and
Mhm.
avoiding that. Like I've had my whatever my versions of accepting my part. Every time I do that, though, it empowers me because at the end of the day, that being in a victim place just fucking hurts you, you know? And
I
when you
know.
can start,
Mhm.
when you say, like, this was my part, you instantly go from this all happened to me to I
Mhm.
have a role to play and I have a fucking say in my life. And like, that's what
Yes.
it starts saying, right?
Yes, that's why it's so powerful, but it's so painful at first. And that's also why I think it would just be so helpful to be told that that's what's on the other side of it. You know what I mean? Because
Mm,
I don't feel like that's like communicated well, or and I'm not quite honestly, I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe the copywriter in me is just like I'm fully like a copywriter now because I'm always like, why aren't we telling people about what's on the other side in the
right.
transformation?
What are their
And people
expectations
do
are?
through their
Yeah.
own stories. They do
Mm,
through their own stories because a thing in meetings is to share like what your life was like and what it's like now.
mm,
It's like the format of like sharing a story, so you share like how dark it was and where you are today. But I don't think it's
like explicitly
again when you're
stated.
early.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I don't think it's ever really, or at least as far as I've come across, it's not explicit. And I've been through a lot of therapy and recovery and rehabs, and but it's not like it's always wrapped up in somebody else's story. And when you're newly getting sober, your brain is always just like looking at everything around you and being like, that's not me, that's not me, that's not
Right.
me, I'm not like that, I'm not like that, I don't do that, I'm not like that. And it's not until you like you force yourself to be open and to start filtering things through the lens of like, okay, I see myself in that, I see myself in that, I
Mm,
see myself in that. And like once you make that shift, everything in the world is so much more like valuable, helpful. And the thing is they like the common thing they say is like take what resonates or take what works for you and leave the rest.
right.
Because that's the point. That's like how you get healthier, how you see, honestly, it's how you connect with people better because you can look at like somebody telling their story and you can do it through the lens of find all the differences and how we're not alike, or you can listen to that same exact story and say I'm going to pick out things that are similar to me. And you're going to
Yes.
have things that work in both ways, right? You're going to have things that you're like, see, we're nothing alike, and you're going to be able to pick out things and be like, wow, we have so much in common, like with every single human
Right.
across the board. um and so I just think that that's also like a really um helpful part of it, but it's also really hard because when you're actively drinking, you don't want to be like, you're like, I'm not like any of those fuckers.
Right. It's this,
You're like,
it's almost this stance of like, that you're describing these two stances, these two energies or ways of being. And one is like,
mm-hmm.
it's very protective, right? Unwilling to like admit truth, right? And will work really really hard to reinforce the story that is being told to them and that they're wanting to believe. that they can do it, that they're not like that, that doesn't apply, whatever, whatever. And then there's this like shift you're talking about, which I'm curious to like, I don't know. It seems to be almost like it's this surrender that happens. It's this like
That's
this right? This like radical
yes.
acceptance and surrender where
That's
you're
it.
like,
That's really it.
I need fucking help here. Like, right? Like,
Yep.
and then you're in this place of like learning, being willing to learn, being open, not constantly like
Mhm.
clamping. I mean, obviously it's like a process like everything is, but
Mhm.
which goes back to what you were saying in the last episode, like you have to like want, you have to fucking want that,
Mhm.
right? Like you have
Mhm.
to want that,
Mhm.
because you'll always be able to find an excuse no matter what. Like
Mhm.
you're always, if you're looking
Mhm.
for it, you're going to be able to find whatever excuse you need to keep you stuck in the
Yep.
place that you're in. This applies, it's so many places, but if you're willing to be on fucking radically honest with yourself and look at your shit and see how, you know, the people that have gone before you and have figured shit out, and trusting that, you know, fuck.
Yeah. No, it's 100% about surrender. Um Honestly, and surrender is like such a beautiful gift, but like
Hmm.
when you're in state of fear, it's like the last fucking thing you want to do, you know?
It's
Like
so
it feels so
counterintuitive. Yeah.
scary. It's
Yeah.
so scary. It's so fucking scary, but it's like it is the thing that you need more than anything. Um yeah, I'm like really glad you touched on that because it's like at the core of it really. Is
Yeah.
just um and it's so funny because it's like like when you talk to somebody who's like starting to get sober, it's like maybe just like consider that you might not know everything.
Mm.
Just like I know it's a novel idea because there's like something about being in an active addiction where your brain is just like that is that doesn't like help you keep like allow yourself to keep drinking. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just
Right.
like a very different like energy. Um and so you're closed and you're clamped down and you're trying to control everything.
Right.
Um and yeah, it's just like two different like energetic existence. It's also really cool to be alive right now where it's like less of a stigma.
Mm.
Something that we haven't really touched on that I think is also an important part of the conversation around alcohol. Because when I was like, you know, getting sober and stuff, I read so many books. I was like, that will keep me sober books. One of them was a book I think called How to Quit the Drink Easily, which is a little outdated. I'm sure there's like a better version of it now. Because I remember reading it and being like, this is from like what, the 80s, you know, when you just like read a
Mm.
book and you're like, um, but in that book, there was a lot of really important concepts of just like how fucking brainwashed we are and to like alcohol being like, I mean, one of the things that really stuck with me is an image from that book where it was like, think about how wild it is that like oh, we're celebrating something in life. Let's have a glass of champagne. Oh, your boyfriend broke up with you. Let's go out and get wasted and like dance the night away. Oh, like, you know what I mean? It's just like alcohol is
Okay.
like literally
Everywhere.
societal's like well, it's like glorified like solution or
Response to
even
everything. Yeah.
yeah, like literally every emotion. There's like a something that can be paired with like drinking. And
Yeah.
I'm
Wow.
really
Yeah.
glad to be alive at a time where it's like less of a thing and also especially like living in LA, man. It's one of the things I love about living here. So many people don't drink and a lot of them don't drink just because like it has nothing to do with recovery. It's just because people here are like a lot of people here are trying to just like live better, healthier,
Be
like
healthier.
more
Yeah.
spiritually sound lives and they and very quickly you realize like alcohol like it just like doesn't feel good when you're trying to like be fully present and calm and feel good in your body.
That's like a thought I've never really like had before, of like explicitly calling out how pervasive the normalization of drinking is just everywhere. Like, you're so right. Yeah.
When you get sober for the first time and you're confronted with going out with friends,
You see that it's everywhere.
and
Yeah.
dealing with the conversations that arise, which are, oh, why aren't you drinking? Oh my God, are you pregnant? Like, the fact that like only being pregnant or having a problem with alcohol are like the only two reasons somebody wouldn't drink
Wow.
just
Yeah.
shows how pervasive and like how much we've been just like indoctrinated with like
Mm-hmm.
drinking and drinking culture. It's actually crazy. And it makes it really hard for people, especially if like your friends, like so many people have friend groups where their entire like thing that they do is like go to brunch and drink bottomless mimosas and
Mm-hmm.
like go out partying. And then if you like have any, if you want to stop drinking and that's like been your whole fucking existence is around like
Right.
partying, like who are you then?
Right.
And that's a big thing that a lot of people go through.
Just the
um
identity that's wrapped up in drinking, that it can become your whole
oh yeah,
identity, your whole
I mean like
social life. Yeah.
the whole like mommy like wine culture
Yes,
thing
that's
is
so
like,
toxic.
it's so toxic and fucking bizarre, quite honestly.
Yeah.
It's like, mommy needs a glass of wine, and then like, it's like, it's like a whole thing. Anyway,
I'm going to refer to my list.
your list of
um,
questions you wrote me.
yes. um,
It felt really good to talk about this. I was very nervous at the beginning of the last episode, but fuck, man, people are just struggling, and it's so fucking hard. But honestly, the things that you have to do to stay sober is like take care of yourself. And then when you're just like consistently taking care of yourself, like fucking life gets easier and better and
mm,
more filled with joy and ease and connection and love and kindness. And it's like you
mm,
realize that the solution to all of your problems, like, yeah, it's work, but it's like the most like worthy work. Like it's like
yes.
it's the work that like makes literally every fucking part of your life better. And so when you're
Mm,
first looking at that mountain of like changes you have to make in your life, you're like, fuck, will I ever be able to do it? This is so hard. And it's like once you have some momentum like kind of working in your favor, and it's not
yeah.
like a fucking it's not a radical thing to like feed yourself 3 square meals a day
Right.
rather than replacing like dinner with booze or something like that. you know it just gets easier and easier and easier, and life just gets better and better and better. And then when like hard shit does happen, you're part of the solution and not part of the problem, because that's something like
Yes.
when hard shit in my life has happened like with family or things like that, I'm not the drunk daughter or sister who's like making it so much more painful on everyone else. I'm like
Mm,
there to like be there for my siblings or be there for my parents, rather than like that fucking hot mess that just created more of a problem when shit got hard. Like that was not a fun feeling.
that's such an amazing like thought and way to look at it. And just like it, and like and the idea of like the building of self-trust, that's not like a light switch that happens, but like the more you keep the promises that you make to yourself and that develops, then when hard things happen, you've got this foundation of like trust in yourself.
You have so many tools that you just like you didn't have. I mean, that's a part of it, is like getting sober gives you an incredible amount of tools to work with in navigating tough times. And I don't know, it's the most important thing I've done in my life is get sober. And
Mm,
it's the best thing I've ever done. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and it's the most like it's the thing that I've done that gives me the most, you know?
mm, mm.
Um anyway,
It's been like a gift, like in a
100%.
yeah. And I love how you, because you said it in previous episodes, like like how you would have like rolled your eyes at somebody saying that,
Oh,
you
for
know,
sure. I'd be like, "Shut the
when you were in like, shut the
fuck up."
fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. But like
Yeah.
that is like something that we have both come to learn just through like challenges and struggles that they do like the other side. You can be better for it, you know? And yeah, I think that this story is gonna like it, I don't know, it's so fucking amazing. I really think that it's important for people, normies, to which I
Did you know
fucking
that word
love.
before today?
No, I didn't. No.
I yeah.
I love it. Um
Yeah.
to like fucking like sit down and take like a good hard look at like the systemic judgment like within us towards
Mhm.
addicts. Like that's something like I fucking have had to do and will continue
Mhm.
to do. And it's like just like you're speaking about, there's this level of surrender to and accepting the things you can't make sense of and the anomaly that is addiction. There's like
Mhm.
a level that the normies have to participate in, that I think, of fucking surrendering to the fact that you don't fucking know and you will never know. I will never know, you know, what
I
it's
hate to
like.
say that, but it's true,
It is,
actually, you
I
know?
feel like it's 100% true, and it isn't until I am like fucking admitting that and saying that I think I even really have an opportunity to like fully
Mm,
like love
mhm.
you. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because
Mhm.
is going to perpetuate judgment. Me thinking, oh, I can figure this
Mhm.
out, or I can
Mhm.
understand what's happening. All that's doing is perpetuating within me judgment and prejudice, like towards addicts. And that is preventing me from loving, right? And
Yeah.
like, so the only thing that I can do is be like, I don't fucking know. I'm never going to know, and I believe you. I fucking believe the things that you're telling me. Like I believe you.
Mhm.
You get to tell me what's what. Like really, you know? And then like how
Mhm.
do I love you there, you know?
Mhm.
Um
Mhm. And
because
being
I just
curious.
yeah.
'Cause it
Yes.
feels it
Pushing
feels really healing to have, like, the person that, you know, you love, like, one of the people you love the most, like, actually be curious to know this, like, painful part of you, actually. You
yeah.
know, because it's like, because it's a part that you're like, "Why the fuck would you wanna know about this?" It's, like, so gross and ugly and painful and, like,
Mm.
and it's just like, if you haven't, like, I had to live through it, right? Like, I didn't have a choice. I said, I just wish I
Mhm.
could, like, have, like, escaped being around myself, right?
Mhm.
But I don't have that choice. I don't have the luxury of just being like, "That's difficult. I'm gonna go away over here now." I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but you have that choice. And so
Mm.
anytime you have somebody in your life who's like, "Oh, fuck, I'm gonna cry." Anytime you have someone in your life who's like, this is really hard, but you're so important to me that I want to like know better and do better. Like you don't have to be perfect. You just have to like say that, and they're gonna be like, "Fuck!" Like,
Be
thank
willing,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, that's like all.
Yeah.
It's just the willingness to like to to like stand in that like pain with someone, and
Mhm.
honestly also if you cannot be scared of it, that's like bonus points for you, but it is scary, so it's also
Mm.
understandable if you're scared. But yeah, just feeling seen and seeing someone like trying to understand is like,
Mhm.
fuck, it's just like such a big proclamation of like love ultimately, you know.
Yeah. Yes. And it's there's so much to like push back against, because there's so many
Mm.
excuses, there's so many fucking stories that we tell ourselves of like, oh no, like let's just pretend that like I'm fully guilty of that, even in my relationship with you, of like being uncomfortable and wanting to avoid the conversation and feeling scared and not knowing what to say. And that's like that perpetuates that like denial, just like perpetuates a separateness and doesn't bring a closeness and a love. And I had to like, and you've had to call me out on my bullshit, and I'm so grateful. Like, and I've had to like get over myself, like
Mm.
to meet to meet you in a place of like this surrender and vulnerability and like I don't fucking know. And so
Mm.
I don't know, I wanted to make sure to say that for all the normies listening, that there's fucking work to
Yes.
be done. There's work to be done, and
Totally.
there's probably fucking apologies that need to be made, and like sorries that
On
need to
both
be said.
sides. On both sides. That is the thing is, like, some people have been on the receiving end of addiction in a way that is so fucking painful and damaging. Like,
Mm.
just, like, the fucking
Mhm.
stories you hear of, like, what addicts like, the damage addicts have created in their, like, wake is, like that's I mean, for every single person, the healing on both the addict side and on the normie side is going to be unique to them. Like,
Mm.
truly, and
Mhm.
that's something that I wish was, like, more of a conversation because I do think in recovery, there tends to be the attitude of, like because there's so much fear because the consequences are so high, like relapse and or, dipping back into your addiction, like, is literally life or death, right?
Right.
And so the consequences are so high. So obviously there's an incredible amount of fear. And I think it kind of bolsters the idea, understandably so, that like there's one way to do it or it's going to look one way. And I just think there's so much more nuance to it. And obviously the conversation of nuance is dangerous with addicts because it's
Mm.
the
The
nuanced
excuses and
conversations are
denial.
the
Yeah.
excuses that they use to be
Mhm.
like, oh, well, she did it this way,
Here's a
so I'm gonna be
loophole. Yeah.
okay. Here's a loophole. It's fucking so tricky and
Wolfie coming
so
out.
complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
so tricky and so complicated, but it's just so worth it. Like, I don't know. It's worth it for I think both the addicts and the normies because they're like I said, there's entire fucking support groups just for the people who, Al-Anon for
Right.
people who were on the receiving end of addiction because it's so fucking just heartbreaking and painful across the board for everyone involved. And I don't know, it was like really beautiful to hear you say like your part in that because I think that I don't know, people who are on the receiving end of it, understandably so, often feel like victims and like the addict is doing
Justified
it
probably in their judgments.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just so complicated and messy.
Yeah.
Mm.
I had I think I want to share this. I was like holding on to it because I didn't want to I don't know, but there was it was a really important transition for me to make. I have someone, a loved one in my family that has struggles with addiction, and I everything that I was just talking about, all the judgment, all the everything was so kept me so far away from this person. And
Mhm.
I had to I had like a fucking revelation, actually, is what happened to me. I had this fucking revelation around like, I can't get into all the details, but I was just starting to think about archetypes and how it seems like people come into this world almost with like this like this these kind of like archetypes or these things that they're going to experience in their life, or these patterns or whatever. We talk a lot about patterns, and I've spoken before about the whole idea of like pushing back on the idea that like God put us here and that like reality is not consensual, right? Which
Mhm.
perpetuates this victim idea. But then the alternative, especially within this conversation, is a fucking hard thing, because then it's like, okay, so then the people who struggle with alcohol addiction, they chose that, right? Like they
Mhm.
chose like
Mhm.
the potentially like this experience in life. And I remember when I was like grappling with that, it just fucking hit me like a ton of bricks, where I'm like, over here I'm having all these judgments towards like this person who's actually probably the bravest fucking person I've ever met. Like their soul, this is like the place I got to, is that their soul is so fucking brave to have like chosen this reality in which they were going to face something so life or death, and that they were going
Mhm.
to like experience like having to grapple with the depths of themselves to come out on the other side, and that I should have nothing but respect and like honor for them. Like, and that's the place that
Mm.
I had to get to, and I had to fucking say apologies for my like judgment and
Mm.
my closed-mindedness and for my complete lack of respect. And it has no place. It has no place, and it's so easy to do. And I just like it just yeah, it's so important. I just like, I hope that's like driving it home to people who are listening. And regardless, it's just like, regardless of if like you have somebody in your life who's like experiencing addiction, this is like such an important, I think it's such an important like thing, I think, to go through and grow, and um to get to a place of like truly like loving other people, like truly
Mm.
loving and respecting other people and uprooting judgments that you have. um anyway, yeah.
I love
That
you
was my
so
like
much.
existential, yeah,
No,
bit,
I
but it,
remember when you
yeah.
were going through that, and it was honestly like so healing for me to hear you say all of that, because I was just like, fuck. Because, when you say that, you're like, one thing that pops into my head. Well, first of all, I got like full body chills, but one thing that like pops in my head is I'm like, yeah, like, trust me, like, we don't really want this for ourselves either. It's fucking hard.
Right.
like,
Right.
now that I'm on the other side, I'm like, that gave me such a gift, that I wouldn't actually want to change anything, but like in it, that's not how I felt. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like, I was like, I
redo,
would do
like, yeah.
anything. I would have fucking given anything to not like be who I was. Like,
Yeah.
Um yeah, it's actually funny. I'll laugh. Ben and I were doing the Esther Perel game that you gave us the other night,
Mm-hmm.
which we need to do it with like a bigger group of people because we know each other so well. It was kind of like there wasn't like a lot to uncover.
Sure.
Which we kind of walked away with like, wow, we know each other really well, because it was
That's
like
like
some
a
of the
good
questions
thing.
we were
Yeah.
like, yeah, some of the questions we were like, do couples not talk about this shit? Sounds like a thing. But I know it's not just for couples; it's for like friends too. So,
Mm-hmm.
but wasn't gonna say it. Oh, it was like I actually forget exactly what the question was, but it was like something that uh I guess made you proud recently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I don't know that I would have like seared this conversation into my mind without that question, and I'm really glad I did, because it made me
Mm.
like pause and reflect. And it was like, and I don't know if I've told you about this, but I had a
I don't think I've heard
conversation
this
with
yet.
my dad the other day, and because there was some conflict going on in my broader family, with like aunts and uncles and stuff, and I just kind of like dug in there, sent an email, kind of called out what I was seeing, but like all through the lens of like my own pain within the family and kind of where I feel uncomfortable. And part of what I touched on was just like always feeling slightly like insecure because of my struggles with addiction and feeling like judged and stuff like that. And I just like, because I knew I knew the place to approach it from was like from my own pain and not trying to be like,
Right.
you're hurting him and stop it. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like, that doesn't fucking
Sure.
work. People put up their defenses and they're like, fuck you. So I just kind of was like, I'm just going to be like super fucking vulnerable here
Yeah.
and like call out my own pain and like hopefully start a conversation. Anyway, it resulted in a lot of amazing conversations with cousins and an aunt, and yeah, just very, very grateful for it all. But I ended up in a conversation with my dad where he was like, I'm laughing because one of the biggest stories I have in my mind that I'm always pushing against, and you know this, is that I'm irresponsible.
Mm.
And my dad goes to me, he's like, you've just become, he's like, you're such a responsible woman. And I was like,
Mm.
I
Yeah.
was like, what?
Wow.
Did I just get the like opposite of the story that I know came from? I mean, my dad just like watching me fucking struggle, like, right?
Yeah.
Like
Wow. Yeah.
being in rehab fucking 3 times. Like, I was definitely like the black sheep, hot mess of the family.
Mm.
Um, And I've just come out to a place where my dad is like referring to me as responsible. And I was like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And I told him, he was like the confidence that it took for you to like be that vulnerable is like very apparent to me. And I'm just like kind of like impressed by like who you've become. And it was, first of all, so fucking validating. It felt so good to hear that from my dad. But also, I mean, I said to him, I was like, this is a direct result of getting sober. Like, my ability to be like comfortable in the uncomfortable, my ability to be like vulnerable and to own my parts, my ability to like, to, come to like really uncomfortable conversations where people are hurting with like empathy and tenderness. It all comes from being like so fucking broken and literally like lying on a fetal position on the floor by a toilet, like puking my guts out and just like deciding that I had to like do something different or die. And so it's like, for me, the journey and how much of a gift it is and how it's like literally made me the person that I am today is exactly how you get to that place where you're like, I actually would like never trade. Like, I don't know, like, I would never trade any of that anymore. Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
so fucking
dad's
powerful.
proud.
Yeah. I know, and to
like
have
35
it
years old, still like happy to like still owning my dad.
100%. Like, and to have it come from him specifically, who he's like, I know he's like the representation to you of responsibility and like strength. And so to have that like specifically come from him is like so meaningful. I'm so fucking glad. Yeah.
Have you I hadn't shared that with you yet, right?
Not that conversation. Like, we talked about other conversations that happened after that, but not that one.
It just like it just happened. Like,
oh,
just
okay,
been,
yeah,
like,
no.
it's because we haven't been talking.
We haven't talked in like a week and a half because I've been dying of COVID.
I know. Yeah, it like just happened, and so it's like
wow,
I'm still feeling the buzz from it, but
so
it's
validating.
also like funny. Yeah.
Ugh, that's so fucking good. I am so grateful for this conversation. It's been
Me
so
too.
good. Yeah.
Felt really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Felt very good. Well, I love you.
I love you. Oh, I was going to say, check out our Patreon if you want to. Patreon.com/innerarchaeology. We've got a bunch of episodes on there.
We just released a really spicy one last time.
It was super spicy, actually.
I had a moment where I was like, do we want to publish that?
I did the same thing. I was like, oh God. You're like, are you sure you want to tell this story? And I'm like, nah, I guess.
Here we go.
It's happening. Oh boy.
Whatever.
Yeah. So
we are who we are.
Yeah. We are.
I think the more and more you just like kind of are like, this is who I am.
This is how it is.
Fucking messy ass ways.
Weirdness. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay, I'm glad we did this. I was nervous.
Me too.
But I'm glad we did it. So
it was good.
All right. Till next time, guys. Thanks for being here.
Bye.